Welcome to Unauthorized Access, an insider's look at the incident response process. I am Kamran and today I'm joined by my co-host, Sadia Mirza. Together, she and I are data privacy and cybersecurity attorneys at Troutman Pepper. Today, we are very pleased and excited to be joined by Keith Wojcieszek, who is a managing director at Kroll. And Keith is going to talk to us today about dark web monitoring in the incident response context. Now, typically, companies will rely on dark web monitoring to monitor the impacts of an incident after the fact to see if any of their data has been released on the dark web. But Keith is going to talk to us today about a different use for dark web monitoring and something that I don't think enough people are talking about. So we're very excited to have Keith talking to us today about dark web monitoring. Keith, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Kamran and Sadia, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. Show number 001, especially at Net Diligence 2022, coming back from COVID. It's been really nice to actually meet in person and have these meetings with everybody to really discover what's going on in cyber, because it's just not easy doing over Zoom or Teams or WebEx anymore. It's really nice to be in person. So thank you for having me today.
Okay, so now you can tell us about what you do and we'll take it. And then there's like 1,000 different ways we can go from there. I know we're keeping like 20, 25 minutes, but let's see. I know there's a lot to unpack.
I started Kroll about 5 years ago, and I founded the Cyber Threat Intelligence Program. And really the overall goal for a program like that is to provide intel not only to internal Kroll, but other partners such as Troutman and just anyone that works alongside us, because threat intelligence really leads investigations. And if you're in the silo, you're not sharing, you're not learning. So it's really about sharing and getting in and becoming a group and understanding what is going on in the threat landscape. So Kroll and the Cyber Threat Intelligence team, we really expert dark web investigations and strategic collections, really to identify any type of malicious activity. Again, been here about 5 years at Kroll. Prior to that, I had a pretty fortunate career. I started off with the U.S. Secret Service, where honestly, it's funny because I never really wanted to get too much involved in cybersecurity. You join the service, you think you're a protection guy, you're going to protect the President of the United States. And lo and behold, one of my bosses says to me, "Hey, what do you think about cyber forensics?" I'm like, "Sure, why not? I'm always up for a challenge." So, I had some background in it, but I did some forensics and just went through my career. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Secret Service started because in 1865, they were combating 1/3 of the country's currency was counterfeit. So they were creating financial infrastructure, keep it safe, keep the currency safe. And so with those responsibilities, the service developed this really good cyber program and a forensic program in alliance with the other agencies. So I got involved with that, and I did a lot of forensics when it came to casework, did a lot of child exploitation, which again is weird for the Secret Service, but we really get involved with that, trying to protect children. And then I really found a niche when it comes to intelligence. And while doing my time in the service, I did all different types of things. But one of the main things that I really enjoyed doing was looking up bad guys that would effectively hurt the financial infrastructure of the U.S. I'm a servant. I'm a servant of the public. I want to do good. I want to make sure everything is good for the people to come in and feel comfortable with their finances, with using credit cards. So I did what I could. And my concentration during this time on the cyber threat intel team was looking at Eastern European bloc. Primarily Russia, Moldova, Ukraine. I'm really getting familiar with those attackers and the culture itself, because you really need to know who your adversaries are, and not just know, but like intimately know, because I think there's and Cameron, you said this earlier, a misconception of dark web monitoring. I think there's a misconception overall about these attackers.
Keith, could you talk even at a very high level when we're talking about threat intelligence? I think a lot of people just think of the quintessential, hacker in the hooded sweatshirt in the dark room plugging away on a screen with green numbers going vertically, and that's sort of the attacker, and that's who you're targeting. But obviously, there's much more to it than that. And you talked a little bit about know thy enemy as a tenet. Could you talk more broadly about threat intelligence in general, and then we can focus in more on what it is you do and how you can utilize threat intelligence in the IR world?
Yeah, you made a really good point there. They're not like these attackers we're dealing with every day, they're not, the hooded sweatshirt. I mean, they may wear hooded sweatshirt, who knows? But the last guy I arrested was a rocket scientist, and it's opportunity is what they're looking for. And threat intelligence, like I said earlier, threat intelligence leads investigations. It really helps investigations bolster to find out what happened. How do we avoid these gaps in the future? Are there challenges that we weren't aware of? And whether it's a technical intelligence, a strategic intelligence, whatever approach you take to this, any information that turns into intelligence and actionable can really bolster one's security. As we see, today's threat landscape is constantly changing. Now what we're seeing is a lot of these phishing. And I know a lot of people say, I'm protected by phishing. I have X, Y, and Z in place. It's going to help me. It really may. It may slow them down. But it only helps if your username and password aren't being sold on the internet. Multi-factor authentication. Great. It's awesome, right? It's very, very good. There's good things about it, but there's vulnerabilities in multi-factor authentication as well. So though you have multi-factor authentication, there's also a step in process to make sure it's actually a good way to thwart off actors. There's certain types of multi-factor, whether it's being a code being sent. Those push notifications used to get. I don't know. Have you ever, like your Apple phones, right? How many times do you see, I sign into a new device and I get a push notification? Do you authorize this? Yes. If you got those, like you got 10 of those in 1 minute, at some point you're like, I'm just sick of this. I'm just going to push yes. There's the threat landscape is always changing, and it's because there's several reasons for it. Cyber insurance, that's changing the threat landscape because now the policies are requiring such a robust approach to really keeping their infrastructure safe and their protocols safe and their safety features safe and everything they have. Because of that, the threat actors either have to get better or they have to figure a way out, okay, if insurance is really requiring all these security features, all these protocols, how am I going to get by it? So they have to regroup it and figure out how they're going to attack. So everything's changing. There's all different angles that are really adding value to where kind of incident response is going, where these threat actors are going.
So Keith, can I ask you a question? Because this comes up in a lot of IR calls, right? And just even talking generally, and it might seem like a ridiculous question to people in the industry, but like when people say the dark web, what is it that we're actually referring to? Can I get on the dark web? Should I get on the dark web? What am I going to see there? Like what? Like, can you break it down for us, just for anyone who doesn't really know?
The dark web is coined phrase, really, just from industry. There's access and there's levels of access that you need to obtain in order to get to certain locations. It could be a website that's encrypted by an encryption key that you need in order to get in. There's forums, there's different things. Now, a lot of these threat actors have gone away from the forums just because, the U.S. government and actually governments worldwide have done an amazing job in taking down some of these high-level forums. But yeah, it's just a location on the internet you just need to know how to get to. There's a prime example just happened, raid forums. Raid forums just taken down. And that's not necessarily considered a dark web. It was a forum that was open to everyone. You can get on it on your regular computer. But there's other areas that take levels of security in order to get on. And you have to have certain keys, you have to have certain VPN clients, and you have to get on through that way. So it's just access to different locations that are not governed, per se, by any type of regulation.
Why do we want to look at them? What's happening on there? Like, well, what do we see if we get there?
Well, there's marketplaces that you can really just buy anything you want, but literally anything. The ones that concentrating on that I have in the past, a lot of the financial data. You can buy healthcare information, you can buy personal identifiable information, credit card data, just anything that is monetizing. So we're looking at when we do dark web. And we're looking at monitoring. We're looking at incidences where we can benefit a company. We're looking for data being sold, information being sold. So it's any information that's of value. And it changes. It really does. Like 2010 was very heavy in credit cards. Can you still buy? Of course you buy credit cards now. But there's different things now. You see Bitcoin wallets being sold. And they're just all different things that you can pretty much buy. You just need to know where to go and how to find it. And you can navigate at some point.
So Keith, and so taking this back to IR, like what types of attacks does the dark, like what is the real benefit? Like when does an insured or client need to engage for dark web monitoring? Or even is it it sounds like it's more than monitoring, but when's the right time and what's the benefit we're going to get out of it?
It should be part of the basic investigation. Is it monitoring? It could be, right? It could be looking for data, but it also could be utilized as this tool to tell the story. understanding those 5 things in an investigation. When did they gain access? How did they gain access? What did they do while they're in there? Did they remove anything? Was anything exfiltrated? Is the threat contained? So as you're looking at those 5 pillars, are you answering those questions? Are you doing everything you can to make sure those questions are answered correctly? And that's the approach. That's the approach Kroll does. That's the approach our team does. And we'll use everything we can to make sure we answer those questions for the client.
Honestly, that's great because I think most people think about dark web monitoring just in the sense of like seeing what data was leaked, but in terms of like notification obligations, right? Like seeing if if any of your data has been leaked out on the dark web, but it seems like there's so much more to that. But, I wanted to ask you, because from the legal side of things, this comes up a lot. So, and I think you guys have a solution to this too. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about the approach, like the keys, the search terms that you use, because I know, Keith, you and me have worked matters, right, where consumers are complaining that their information has been exposed. They're trying to tie it back to a particular incident. And so if we were just to search for, like if somebody went and searched for Sadia Mirza and her social, right, you probably will find it somewhere. I'm assuming it's out there somewhere. But I'm never going to know which incident it was leaked from. It's probably been compromised several thousand, hopefully not, but several times, right? And so from that side, it opens up a can of worms, right? Like where you can't point into a particular company or organization or a particular breach. But I think what you're talking about, it's a little bit different. You're not trying to tie, it's not one particular consumer's information. Maybe you craft search terms specific to an organization and their domain and do searches, things along those lines. And maybe that's a little bit more fruitful if you're adding it to a component of the investigation. Are you following my line of thinking here?
Yeah, no, so right with you. Yeah, and you mentioned how do you determine that this particular either fraud activity or something happened, and I see this on this marketplace. How do I determine? There are ways, but it's just not easy, right? So unless the threat actor said, "Hey, I got this from this hack I did," are you going to see that? You're not going to see that. You can potentially cross-reference time frames, but it's so hard because it's looking at the real picture here. Your email has been compromised. So you have a Yahoo email account. What people don't understand is how much sensitive data do you have in your email? Tax returns, health appointments. Nowadays everything's online, right? You're getting emails for everything. So all of this data that is just so rich in personal identifiable information, everyone's worried about the file server. Oh, I have all my data here. It probably has everything plus more in your email account. And when these email breaches occur, how can you pinpoint one particular incident that your data is being exposed on any kind of marketplace when you're victim of maybe 10 different breaches that you utilize that email and password? Because it's easier for me to keep the same password for all my accounts. When I'm breached by one, I'm exposing my email, and next thing you know, they're in my email account. I may not know it, but they're taking data. So it's very difficult to say that this one breach occurred and this one time my identifiers were exposed were because of this one breach. Unless the threat actor is specifically saying, I took that, this is how I took it, and I know, Sadia, that I took your stuff.
They have to link it together for you, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very far-fetched. Again, there are possibilities, and a lot of, I think, what's more of a government level, doing undercover operations and doing like search warrant and other court-ordered documents and tasks that are provided, a little bit easier, but still very challenging.
Honestly, this whole conversation has been, even like we do incident response day in and day out, and I think there's still a lot of, it was very helpful to me because I think I've always thought about this in that context too of just, what's been leaked. So Keith, is it really when you don't have the logs, you don't have the information that you need to conduct a real investigation? Is that the right time, or is there additional moments too where it just needs to be added as a component? What do you think?
So, it's tough because you're battling with not only it's scary. That's like the dark web. People are scared. They're scared of what they're potentially going to affect. We may find something that may not be good, but wouldn't it be better that we find it and fix it so it's not something down the road? But there's also risks with that too, right? So the timing is difficult, right? So I think it should be a part of the investigation, and it's because I'm in it all the time, right? So I think it could benefit every investigation, but there is definitely certain circumstances where it may not be the best choice. But again, it's something that you need to weigh in on where the investigation is going. A BEC, are you doing a business email compromise? Do we need to know? I mean, that would be good to find out credentials. Well, why not? Why not just use that domain? Is there any other credentials being sold? Or was this just a single effect? So there's all different types of scenarios that you can bring it in on. It's really kind of the maturity of the team that's doing the investigation, as well as the risk tolerance of the clients.
So what about outside of investigations? Like, I'm assuming it must be a very mature client. Like, you have to be pretty far along in your information security program to just add this as a component of your security program. Do you have clients doing that?
We do. It is. So yeah, there is a maturity level for sure. But think about this. The status quo are those that are getting attacked. I'll tell you again, the status quo are getting attacked. So what are you doing to better yourself? Are you developing a plan, not only an incident response plan, but a plan that will grow your cybersecurity maturity as you grow as a business? Dark web monitoring is good. Like you have dark web monitoring, you're looking for keywords and whatever. But I think there's a better component to that, because you have maybe do an internal pen test or a vulnerability assessment, which again, that is key. I think those are the keys. You want to harden your environment. And when you want to add in dark web monitoring, it needs to be more than just monitoring, right? You need to take a look at a step back. It's not just monitoring for turns, but it's, okay, I have Citrix, I have Manage Engine, I have Exchange. I need to know not only from a pen testing standpoint or a proactive standpoint, I need to know from anyone, if anyone goes out there and sees what's going on, am I vulnerable? And that should be part of this dark web monitoring is not only testing your terms and your keywords, but understanding your network, understanding your environment to provide intelligence back to you that if something does have a 0-day vulnerability or something does have something that's attacked, that your threat intelligence team, whether it's internal or you're leasing from somebody or you have a partnership with somebody, is on it and they understand it. And they're not just monitoring for trends, but they're monitoring for your environment. I think that's the key component to a mature and understanding the risks of a business. That's going to be key. That's going to be how you're going to defeat these bad guys.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I know, Keith, we're running out of time. But one final last question. So last night when someone happened to lose their blazer with their wallet in it, and I conducted some threat intelligence to track it down until the wee hours of the morning, were you impressed or no?
So I was extremely impressed, both by you and Kamran, with the dedication and the way you approached it. You were a true investigator, an unbelievable outcome.
Well, Keith, thank you so much. We had it was a rough start, I know. Thank you so much for bearing with us right now for the last 2 days. It was, Net D was great because you were there with us, so we really appreciate you going on this journey with us.
Thank you, and really good luck with this. You guys are phenomenal. And really going to add some really good insight to cybersecurity here in the future. So thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, thank you so much, Keith, for taking the time to meet with us today and talk with us about dark web monitoring. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience did as well. For our devoted podcast listeners, you're probably all anticipating the trivia question for this month's podcast. And without further ado, the trivia question is, in 1865, what percentage of U.S. currency was counterfeit? Now, the first person that can answer that question and send that answer to the incident.response@troutman.com email address will receive a prize. And this week's prize is a sweatshirt with the privacy and cyber logo from Troutman Pepper to commemorate the new practice group that we have here. Now, I also want to encourage everybody to subscribe to our podcast. There is a link below to which you can subscribe and be on the lookout for next month's edition where we'll have a surprise guest. And I also want to encourage all our listeners to visit the Troutman.com website. There's lots of great information regarding privacy and cybersecurity, including a link to our More Privacy Please monthly newsletter, which talks about all things privacy, and also be on the lookout for monthly newsletter dealing with all things cybersecurity. That's going to be coming soon. Well, thank you, everybody, and we hope to have you join us next month.
Copyright Troutman Pepper Hamilton Sanders, LLP. These recorded materials are designed for educational purposes only. This podcast is not legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individual participants. Troutman Pepper does not make any representations or warranties, express or implied, regarding the contents of this podcast. Information on previous case results does not guarantee a similar future result. Users of this podcast may save and use the podcast only for personal or other non-commercial educational purposes. No other use, including, without limitation, reproduction, retransmission, or editing of this podcast may be made without the prior written permission of Troutman Pepper. If you have any questions, please contact us at troutman.com.